Hello, everyone. This is Philosophy of the People with Ben Burgess and Stefan Bertram. And contrary to the expectations in chat, it's me that's having a party at the moment. So if any party noises pick up on mic, I'm sorry. But Ben talks mostly anyway, and if they start picking up, I'll just mute myself.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like
It's
selective muteness. I've got my cupboard open.
say probably a safe bet. There's no party going on here. This is like I'm a million years old. This is extremely boring.
I've told you before about people getting incredibly heated about Newcomb's problem, the one box, two box thing.
That is a problem, yeah.
So someone blocked me about it yesterday on Reddit.
Yeah?
It got very, very heated very quickly.
That's awesome. I've actually, I think I've spent more time talking about Newcomb's puzzle than most human beings, and I have to say I've never actually heard anybody get angry about it.
You need to come to Reddit, man. I think basically kind of like naive one boxes. I think basically have the impression that two boxes are like messing with them, like, and they're like obviously wrong, and they get really annoyed really fast. I can understand it emotively, but that's still just wrong.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because I think I don't remember if this was one of the ones we did when we did those two episodes.
We did do it, yeah, but we didn't talk about it much because obviously we were going through 40 questions or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly have real quick because this is wildly off topic for anybody who has no idea what we're talking about. So this is the classic puzzle about there are two boxes. One of them is either empty or has say $1,000 in it. One of them one of them definitely has $1,000 in it. One of them is either empty or has $1 million in it. And you have to choose between either opening, there's an option where you can either open both boxes or you can only open the box that might be empty and might have $1 million, but there's a nearly omniscient, like 99.999% of predictor who has predicted that if you only open the box that might be empty and might have $1 million in it, it'll have $1 million in it, and that if you open both, it'll have both. But there's no causation. It's not like, he has some power to like erase the money.
There's very specifically no retro causality involved. Otherwise, it's a trivial problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So yeah, one boxers think, well, obviously, if there's a 99.999% chance that if I do this, I'll get $1 million. And if I don't, I'll only have 1,000, then I should clearly do that. That's just obvious. And two boxers think, well, if either the box that has either $1 million or nothing already has $1 million in it, or it doesn't. Either way, my decision won't change that, right? So if it has $1 million in it, then by opening both boxes, I'm getting $1 million, 1,000. And if it has nothing in it, then I'm getting 1,000 rather than nothing. So either way, I'll be $1,000 richer if I open both boxes. Therefore, I should open both boxes. And this is something, this is not the only example like this, right? But this is something where I honestly have no idea what I think anymore, because I've spent so much time over the years, on this where in my experience, people who think that one box is right, just as you said, kind of think that two boxes madness. People who think that two boxes right sort of think people who think one box aren't get in. No. Either way, you'll be better off, right?
Yeah.
And in
front of them, nothing can happen,
Yeah. There's literally no scenario where you'd be worse off if you only open up one box. And this is because really what is going on here, I think, is that there are two there are two plausible principles about rational decision making that are coming into conflict in this situation, and so depending on which
I think that's what it was intended to draw out in the first place.
Right, exactly, right. So they have
alongside.
So because I've spent so much time, I was going to say, sort of in like classes, trying to get students to see the force of whichever intuition they don't start out saying. I've spent so much time motivating each of these that like I've completely lost touch with whatever my original intuitions were.
Right?
Yeah.
I think alongside compatibilism, I think getting the two box position, as you not agreeing with it, but getting it and getting the compatibilist position is like a good way to kind of step up from complete amateur philosopher to knower of some things. And just
I think that's
great.
I think that's right. I also see Kushlook in the chat says this is like the Monty Hall problem. Well,
The Monte
yeah,
Carlo problem has a
has a
certain
definite
mathematical
solution.
answer, which is just unintuitive.
Yeah, exactly right. So the difference is, I mean, I can see it's the same. Can feel like this. It's twisting your head in the same sort of way. But yeah,
Yeah.
the difference is that like in the with Newcomb's paradox, it's like it's almost like it almost seems like one of those weird things like, oh, some people just have the gene where cilantro tastes like soap to them, that they have like the intuition runs so deep on either side. And whereas Monty Hall problem, as you say, there's a mathematically certain solution. It's just very counterintuitive.
I don't think political idealism, not sorry, not political idealism, ideal political theory versus political realism. I don't think this is one which has an obvious Reddit answer. Though you think it could be. Though it could go either
Mhm.
way, right? But that's the topic for today to
Yeah,
circle back around.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, how we should feel about sort of trying to figure out what would count as justice if we could just will away all the political obstacles, whether this is even something we should bother with, etc. Is probably very unlike Newcomb's problem in a way that might be useful. There might be more to say about it, but yeah, that's the topic. The sort of cluster of cases. I mean, I'm sort of the kind of half joking title, right? The fully automated Palestinian luxury communism from the river to the sea is like about combining two examples of this genre. And I do ultimately, talk quite a bit about the Palestine case at the end, but the larger subject is trying to think analytically about this kind of range of about this kind of category of political ideas that just calling maximalist demands, right? So maximalist demands, just meaning roughly left-wing political proposals that are very far outside of the realm of what feels politically possible in the short term.
Yeah, of which you give a good set and you divide into a triple schema of like ridiculous demands which you wouldn't even want actually.
Right.
Ridiculous demands. Wait, I forgot the middle one. Actually, what's the middle one?
Yeah. So the middle one are ones that So because on the top end, like you said, are demands that like sort of basically, to be extremely unkind and uncharitable for a moment, like shit that like lefties say because it makes them feel edgy, but that doesn't even really make sense if you think about it, or has
And
a
when they justify it, they'll try and say, "Well, actually, I didn't mean the thing I said. I'm just using
yeah
that word to be awkward and unpopular.
yeah exactly. There's a lot of
I'm
it's a
trying to
very
unimpress everyone at the school dance."
yeah exactly. It's a sort of perverse variation of Modern Bailey, right? Because like in a typical Modern Bailey, they have a that's the your well, actually, I don't know. As I'm saying that, I wonder if that's right. But anyway, yes, it's definitely a version of a Modern Bailey thing. It's just sort of very strange because you're sort of deploying the Modern Bailey thing where you have your the Bailey where you like to spend your time, which is the sort of exciting sounding claim, and then the Mott you can retreat to. That's the defensible claim. But it's a version of that that's in service of the goal of sounding extreme, which
Yeah.
is a very odd goal, right? Like that. There's like if you think about that, right? Like if you're
Well, I mean, it's odd politically, but not odd on Twitter.
yes, yeah, no, exactly.
In like a competition for online attention, it's like a perfectly rational one.
Yeah, the competition for online.
If we're being
Yeah,
decision theorists today.
yeah, fair. That's that's a good distinction, right? So it's like, if you think that, as the thesis in Feuerbach says, the point is to change it, right? Then it's extremely odd. If you think that the point is to get eyeballs and get eyeballs on you on Twitter, and to sound extremely base to people who like you, and to sound horrifying to people who will give you lots of useful, horrified engagement, then yeah, sure, great, yeah, sound as extreme as possible at all times about all subjects, right? That is the way to do it. But yeah, that's so I do think many of the things in the first category have this, sort of strange modern Bailey aspect to them that, at least in many experience, many of their advocates will retreat from from taking them seriously when pressed at all.
And which are normally formulated in aping abolish capitalism with variously less popular formulations. Such as abolish the family, abolish the police, abolish prisons.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, and, then you sort of say, well, when you say, right, abolish abolish the police, what that sounds like, frankly, is a libertarian dystopia where we'd have private security for rich people and Mad Max for poor people. And
right, so, the police are a very recent invention, as we've discussed before.
Totally, yeah. Yeah, much like much like sewage treatment, and and other things that are features of modern societies that that I wouldn't particularly want to to go back on, right? And like, the fact is that nobody really would, right? Yes, my dog looks very different today. That's dog is on the floor. That's Ash is the cat. But yeah, that, like, people, people who are asked to, like, who are pushed on any of the obvious problems that, so, okay, I'm not actually advocating private security for rich people and Mad Max for poor people, because I don't actually want to abolish these things until we've gotten rid of capitalism first, or well, sure, maybe we'd have some sort of publicly owned entity that enforced laws, but it'd be so different that you wouldn't even want to call it the police. And it's like, okay, so if what you mean is that you want to economically change society and then hope that crime will wither away, then, look, I don't necessarily share your optimism. It seems to me that interpersonal violence does have some non-economic roots, but I believe that most crime would wither away under socialism. I think,
and also that was clearly not what people were demanding in summer 2020, right?
Yeah, clearly not, right? Like, that is clearly not,
that wasn't what Minneapolis Democratic Party were trying to pass in their council, whatever, was it?
Yeah. I mean, what they were trying to, although granted, what they were trying to pass was, like, essentially a scheme to rename the police, but but certainly what they were trying to pacify by passing it wasn't that, right? Like, it, nobody's, what do you want? Abolish the police. When do you want it? 100 or so years after the fall of capitalism, right? Like, nobody's actually saying that, and it certainly lacks a certain edge, right? If you're saying, oh, I hope that one day we won't need some of these things, yes, wage theft would surely diminish. That's correct. Yeah, and, like, honestly, I actually do think that most violent crime would go away eventually. That they have I mean, I think there's, like, solid reasons to think that, just based on what we can already see under capitalism, that that you have vastly less violent crime in countries that have adopted the sort of most far-reaching social democratic reforms. And also that, just even in the United States, right? Like, people, I really don't know of a lot of cases of people growing up in prosperous suburbs and, joining street gangs. I'm sure you can, like, come up with an example somewhere, right? But it doesn't seem to be a common phenomenon.
I mean, it's like the percentage of the number of people that do that versus the number of people who pretend that they do that and, like, rap about it. is massively in favor of that group, despite how few actual rappers there are.
Yeah, exactly. And yes, as I see the as I see Kushlik saying in the chat, it's like, yes, it's not that it's certainly not that the police are great. They're very, very not, right? Like, it's not to pick the city that I live in, that the LAPD is a very fine institution, which we should all be very proud of, right? That's it's part of a capitalist state, and it's very bad in the ways that the institutions of a capitalist state are sort of predictably bad. But
The guy that's currently trying to overthrow the government in Haiti?
Oh yeah, vaguely.
The gang leader, he has an amazing career path where he started off as just like a normal cop in Haiti, and then he started doing like government-backed death squad stuff, and then left the police but kept doing government-backed death squad stuff until he decided actually he could go independent.
Realized, made the realization, as so many budding entrepreneurs have, that there were more opportunities for him in the private sector. Yeah, which is not, unlike a lot of the KGB to Russian mafia transitions, or, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, I would argue is we didn't even, obviously it's not very abstract and philosophical, but we didn't even talk about it during our Killing Soldiers episode. But I think is also an underrated danger of armed struggle as a tactic that upon failure, lots of people are very good at doing armed struggle and not very good at anything else, and will find ways to ply their trade in the private sector. But
yeah, they transition like degenerate revolutionary groups straight to drug dealing empires.
Yeah, exactly. Which
like
there are
full on
depressing number of examples of that. But yeah, right. So it's like, clearly, if what you think is, there'll be some sort of publicly owned entity that will be in the business of enforcing whatever laws we still have, right? Like, let's just take it as a given. There are lots of laws right now we don't think should be laws, but whatever laws there still have, there's going to be some sort of public entity that's in charge of enforcing them. I'd say, well, I wouldn't really recommend calling that police abolition, because one, it's not very descriptively accurate, and two, it's sort of guaranteed to make most normal working class people not like what you're selling, right? Because that sounds awful, right? And similarly, when you talk about like abolishing the family, despite the fact that there's a more venerable, left tradition of talking this way, although a little ambiguous. I mean, if you read like the line in the manifesto about abolishing the family, I think it's it's not really like, I mean, basically what it says is, capitalism is already doing that. But
I mean, that's the thing also with kind of police abolition, like in the fact that we're going towards a society where we aren't going to have like a federally run justice system owned by the state. We're rather going to have some weird kind of public-private enterprise, blah blah blah, grift, blah blah blah. So like the police are concretely being abolished as kind of like a pure public entity. It's just going to be really bad.
Yeah, exactly.
The same thing with abolishing the family, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, because if you're talking about abolishing the family, I mean, one, it's very unclear what that even could mean, even as a hazily understood goal, never mind a political program. Because if you mean, I mean, actually go back to the line in the manifesto, if you mean not having families be like they were in the 19th century, good job, team, right? Mission accomplished, right? That is already,
woo, we did it.
Yeah, exactly. They are already very unlike that, right? In many, many important ways.
Yeah, we're going to abolish the patriarchal family in Niger.
Yeah, exactly, right. That's the sort of, the sort of traditional patriarchal family where rape isn't recognized within the context of marriage, where domestic abuse is tolerated and normal.
I mean, most importantly, like how property was traced, right?
Yeah, sure, for sure, right?
Like women couldn't like sign contracts independently and so on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the doctrine of coverture. So many of the wife's legal rights, were subsumed by her husband upon marriage. Yeah, that is gone. Which to be clear, is good, right? It should be gone, right? It's that's historical progress. I think I basically think liberal modernity is a good thing as far as it goes. It's just not, it's just not enough.
Second best idea ever, as I like to say.
Yeah, exactly. And so like, yeah, that's already happened. Now, would family arrangements continue to change as the sort of economic foundations of society change? Almost certainly, right? Like this is, I mean, I think anybody who claims to know how, is being very mean by hoarding their crystal ball, right? Like
Right, and I mean the most kind of defensible version of family abolition is saying the family is inevitably going to change, and so we're going to try and intervene such that we can to push it in a direction which is good. But rhetorically, you could equally claim that that is not family abolition, but that's family like a defense of the family. And it seems like the latter would be much more likely to be rhetorically successful among the general public, even with the
yeah,
same exact policies.
yeah, yes, very, very much so, right? So it's like, look, I don't doubt that the sort of like what family arrangements, when we're talking about voluntary, right, arrangements, right? I mean, you don't choose what family to be born into, but certainly voluntary as far as the parents go, and with the sort of wide-ranging protections the liberal societies, have come to institute, for even the rights of children. If you're talking about voluntary family arrangements, yeah, look, I kind of know what I very much know what kind of family arrangements most people, not everybody, want to have right now. And, I think it's extremely plausible that, like, look, cultures evolve over time. They especially evolve over time when the economic foundations of society change in dramatic ways. So, I have no doubt that they would continue changing, after transition to socialism, and probably in unpredictable ways because we haven't lived under that, right? But but yeah, one, um, it's not like if abolish the family means anything, it's like sort of intentionally socially engineer people into having different family arrangements that they would have otherwise, right? That this is, you're proposing, if you're using this as a political slogan, right, then you have the idea is that this is somehow a goal of your politics to change, to do this kind of social engineering, which actually strikes me as troublingly liberal on principle. That, like, I think that the goal of left politics should be to give people the, power and material resources to do whatever they want with their lives, not to tell them what to do with their lives, right? Is, within, and yes, I know somebody will always say within reasonable limits, guys. Yeah, like, but within reasonable limits, not so much to tell them what to do with their lives. So it's like, yeah, I think if people, if people want to have nuclear families, then more power to them. In fact, I think that a goal of, I think a decent society would make it a lot easier to do that than it is right now, for many people, for many reasons, right? Financial stress and pressure, et cetera, childcare. If people want to live on, polyamorous, Wiccan communes, then, more power to them. It's not my business, but,
Happy Mother's Day, by the way, in the UK.
Happy Mother's Day. That's, yes. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're actually saying it's a goal of your politics to intentionally social engineer people into making different family choices, I'm not really on board with that. And it's, yeah. And it's also, there's, and yeah, and if you just mean, I mean, like, at the sort of most ludicrous end of this, I've actually seen people, on twitter.com, and it's like the Blade Runner speech, right? I've seen things people wouldn't believe. That's, like, I've seen people say, well, actually, if you think about it, even like, pushing for Medicare for all and stuff like that is like a form of family abolitionist politics, because now people don't rely on their families to meet some of these needs anymore. And it's like, okay, so you're trying to verbally jiu-jitsu yourself into finding a way to reframe incredibly popular policies as something that's incredibly unpopular and alienating to normal people for some reason.
Did you
Like,
see
don't
that
do
Ireland
that.
just had 2 failed referendums?
I did. I haven't, like, I kind of glanced at an article about that this morning. I don't really understand all the details.
Well, basically, there was two like lib proposals. One to reform kind of how a family is judged in the constitution, and another one to reform how like women are treated in the constitution. And they both failed basically because they just like fucked up the wording and campaigning, such that like disabled people opposed it because it would seem to put the responsibility on families to care for disabled people instead of putting it on the state. But the thing that they were getting rid of in regards to women was saying that women like belong in the
Uh,
kitchen, but they managed to fuck up the new wording so badly that the Irish people just voted no.
yeah, well, fair enough. Better luck next time. Yeah. And yes, I do. So I think, if I'm understanding the comment correctly, I think what Reclaim Dasein is pointing out in the chat is, well, I mean, in that same passage from the manifesto that I just mentioned, Marx and Engels are, really Marx. Little bit Jenny, but anyway, has a says. She definitely at least wrote the first sentence. There's some draft there, but anyway, says it does say the thing I said he said, which is the thing about how capitalism is already doing that. But it also does say, well, if what you mean is we want to abolish, the exploitation of children, then yes,
Right,
right,
because
like,
the 19th
which
century like proletarian family was basically like a reserve army of labor for the man.
yeah, right. So it's like, yes, child labor is bad. I think we can all agree on that part. But although we can all agree on it, actually, in multiple red states right now, there are laws at various stages to considerably loosen the restrictions on on child labor. Yes, family equals free infinite breadsticks.
Yeah, I saw that they
It's
passed one of these
nice.
bills, and then like the next day, like a 15-year-old like fell into a fresher or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's yeah. It's honestly, this is kind of it's kind of hard to remember sometimes that if you're mostly thinking about sort of national and global level political developments, don't get me wrong, there's more than enough nightmarish evil to go around there, right? See Gaza, but it's easy to forget how much what goes on in state legislatures all the time is just like really cartoonishly evil in some ways, in a way that's different because like so few people are actually paying attention
Right,
to
it's
it.
it's like really
Like
low
the
money and like really full of total headbangers,
yeah,
such that like I'm sure like if like someone who's just a millionaire could like really try to just pass like a piss take law, and if they framed it in the right way, they could pass it. You know.
yeah, I mean, like the Florida legislature was just voting on this thing to ban cities in Florida from passing like local laws to guarantee workers rest time and access to shade. So it's like this is the kind of thing that we're talking about. But yeah, right. Okay, so like all this sort of abolish police, abolish prisons, abolish family, etc. Like a lot of that stuff just strikes me as like a sort of combination of attention economy and a certain kind of overlapping phenomenon, which is the academics who enjoy thinking of themselves as being extremely
Like
radical.
it
And
either means something other than what it seems to mean, in which case you shouldn't say it, or it's advocating for something which is bad, in which case you shouldn't say it.
yeah, exactly. Right. So it's like, I think to the extent that we take these slogans more seriously than their advocates often seem to, I actually don't think that that sort of maximalist slogans in this first box are particularly desirable, right? So it's like that one's easy, right? It's like, okay, so should we advocate maximalist slogans of that kind? No, because like before we even get to any other objections to maximalism, it's just not desirable anyway. So who cares? Second box, right? The in between box are things that would be extremely desirable if we knew how to do them, but we don't right now, right? So so in other words, if you say, yeah, if you say like we should have fully, thank you, Hector. If you say we should have fully automated luxury communism, I would say yes, I agree. But that's not, like if by which you mean if a genie, confronted you and gave you three wishes, should fully automated luxury communism be one of them? Yes, right. Do that one first, actually. But that's not like just sort of hoping that I don't know, the coming technological singularity delivers that to us isn't really a political
Yeah, I mean,
program,
it's not
right?
politics at all.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a thing you might hope happens in the future. And it's like, it's not, I think in order for something to really count as a political demand, properly speaking, it has to be something that at the very least, if you had,
I was kind of surprised that you put a
know,
Lenin quote in, but you didn't put the whom Lenin quote. The whole question is who will
whom.
overcome whom.
Oh yeah. No, that's I should have. But that's, but yeah, like in the like just yeah, there are lots of things that are sort of desirable if we could work out how exactly to do them. But even if we could somehow even if we could overcome all the political obstacles, right? If like you ask the genie, to, I don't know, defeat global capital and install socialist governments in power everywhere in the world, right? Then you wouldn't, that wouldn't be enough to get you fully out of bed luxury communism. You'd have to use that one as a wish in itself, right? So that's the second category. But then the third category are maximalist demands that we do know how to do, right? That's not that there's no sort of like mystery about how to implement if the political obstacles didn't exist. And of course, that's where it gets interesting because if you have, if the, because like this is where all the other questions you could ask about maximalist demands finally start kicking in, right? Because if you say, all right, if we have things that, if we could just, ask the genie to defeat global capital for us, then we'd have no problem doing all the rest of the stuff without wasting any wishes on it. Then that's where it gets interesting. That's like, okay, well, is it still useful to talk about those? If so, why? Is this all just kind of a silly waste of time? Etc. And so, I think like the sort of most obvious example of a box number 3 maximalist demand would be like collective ownership of the means of production, right? Like that's something that, I think that there are all sorts of plausible things we could say about how that, could work. I think we have there are flawed models from the 20th century of how it, did work, but, I think learning various positive and negative lessons from that, right? I think that you could say plausible things about, about how it could work. And so is that, there's still, I think there's a sort of, I think there, even there, right, though, there's an impulse that a lot of people are going to have, like not people who are going to be watching this right now, right, but other people, the second group sadly outnumbering the first group, that it's that this is just something that you shouldn't, that you shouldn't waste your time on, right? That like that's like, yes, okay, perhaps sure, even if you were to grant the normative case, right, perhaps that would be nice, right?
I mean, it's
But
especially funny in the context of Palestine, right? Where I agree with you that the demand is for like a one state Palestine is maximalist, but is literally just asking for like liberalism. And like
yeah, yeah,
maybe not
no,
even liberalism as like maybe like 19th century liberalism, maybe kind of like a
yeah, no, it's
semi Islamist, semi Judaic, like not at all secular kind of liberalism at all, but just kind of like yeah, like some weird stuff that you'd get 200 years ago in Western Europe,
yeah. I mean, it's
like a two national church Palestine, you know.
yeah. I mean, I obviously I would, if we're talking about maximalist demands, right? I'd like that to be as secular as possible, but sure, right?
But I'm
I
saying
have
that
a
that would be
but
maximalist also, right? Like that's so far away from
oh no, no, I see what you're saying, right? Like a single democratic but not entirely secular, or a single democratic but not
yeah.
secular
I
is a
like
sort of
how Lebanon works,
bi-religious,
you
right?
know.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's true. That's true. That itself is maximalist right now, and certainly what I'm talking about here, which is this like a single secular democratic state. Since while we're in maximalism land, let's just let's go for broke, right? They have a that like even that, as you say, is just liberalism, right? I mean, like this isn't
We're not actually asking
this
for
is
communist Palestine. Though
yeah, yeah,
actually,
yeah. I
communist
mean,
Palestine, I think
again,
probably got more votes in the last Palestinian general election than liberal Palestine did. Depends how you take Qatar, I guess.
uh I guess, yeah. It's a little unclear how those map on there, but yeah, that's but yeah, I mean it like just saying, and this is actually really a point worth dwelling on because like I think a lot of people really don't recognize this in a way that's kind of crazy. Like in various directions, I think a lot of people don't recognize this. Like one example that I've spent a lot of time in the last several months thinking about is all of the sort of IDW light kind of people on like the center right that you're sort of just to give you a representative sample of who I'm thinking of, right? Like your sort of Quillette magazine people, your that your Sam Harris's perhaps your Free Press, Barry Weiss people, etc. There's the I don't think Ario still exists, but I mean, if they did, right, they would be in this category too. In other words, people who are not like demented IDW. They don't, like everybody I just listed off thinks Biden won the 2020 election and COVID is real, right? But like these are all people who in their heads are like very passionate defenders of Enlightenment values. And as has come out, I think, in a really grotesque way in the last several months, they're also all like super duper hardcore defenders of the Israeli status quo. And it's like, well, no, right? You can't do, I mean, you clearly can say whatever the fuck you want, but like that's, you cannot coherently, right, do both of those, right?
All right. I mean,
This
the
is,
maximalist
because,
demand in this case is like, no, don't do a genocide like right now, like
yeah, yeah,
really
yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. I mean, even just like keep everything else the same, but don't do a genocide, right? Is beyond a lot of these
Yeah.
people, right? Like even that threshold. But like certainly the idea that like you should have what would be count as the maximalist demand in this case, that you should have that the current state that exists, right? Like that since 1967, there has been, I mean, there's a sort of strange diplomatic construction in where like the PLO essentially has like done the state of Palestine rebranding and gone around the world collecting diplomatic recognitions as a pressure tactic. But, in facts on the ground terms, right, there has been one state from the river to the sea for 56 years. People who have spent their entire life, every single day of their life living under it, would now qualify for various senior citizen discounts at restaurants. And so the maximalist demand here would just be, okay, within the borders of the state as it currently is, one man, one vote. They give everybody equal rights. And by the way, people who used to live here and their children and grandchildren get to come back, right? That's it, right? Like that's what I just said is because in the context of, current international political discourse, that's considered so outlandishly maximalist and radical that, people sort of have trouble contemplating with a straight face. But look, you want to talk about Enlightenment values. I mean, that is just fucking basic, like 18th century liberalism, right? Like, that you can't, like, this is the, the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, that like everybody's born with the same rights, right? That's like, if you believe that, right, then if you have, post 1789 values, then obviously what I just said is what you should support, right?
Supporting Israel is supporting basically like the 4th century BC policy of Sparta to its helots.
More or less, yeah. I mean, that is pretty much exactly what it is. That you have this extremely militarized state that sort of has to stay that way to keep down, its subject population. That when there are, predictable explosions and counter atrocities, then that justifies clamping down harder, and exactly. Like this is what all these people support could not be further from, sort of basic ass liberal values, like never mind any sort of radical socialist, extensions of those. And so yeah, like I think that is the sort of thing that, and I think, thinking about this maybe kind of helps ground us in why I think there is, utility in talking about maximalist demands done in the right spirit, right? Like, in other words, that I don't, I mean, the sort of jokey title notwithstanding, right? Like, I don't want to sound edgy and radical for the sake of sounding edgy and radical.
Right. I mean, the contrast between the kind of positions we talked about at the start are extreme positions which are impossible in a very significant sense, but also supported by no one. But the position that these maximalist positions on Palestine, when you clearly make the case for them, should reasonably be supported by anyone in a Western democracy that isn't already a headbanger.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna just I'm just gonna do a quick timeout here. How are you using the word headbanger here? This might be some slang I'm not.
Yeah,
really
no,
following.
I guess it's British slang. It just means like the people on the far right of the Conservative Party, like their weirdest MPs or headbangers. Like they're banging their head against the wall.
There we go. That makes sense. Yeah, no, this is a little bit of cultural translation problem because they have the only usage of headbanger I'm familiar with is like the heavy metal fan.
Oh,
usage,
right, I see.
That's the...
right, yeah, I didn't think of that.
Okay, now I'm good now. Yeah, no, exactly, right? Like this is, and so yeah, I think thinking about it in those thinking about it in those terms, right? I mean, I think should and footnote, by the way, the preview of coming attractions for Tuesdays, This is Revolution episode, when I'm on to talk about another article I've written about this, the case for all of these things is in fact strengthened when you stop thinking that anybody's ancestry matters for anything. Uh, but but in any case, this is, I think this is something where, the case for it, I think is so clearly normatively compelling, right? Like, and it's not, yes, exactly, Charles Ghost, not like Headbanger listening to Bitter Lake. That, that, and it's not that I want to sort of, I enjoy sounding extreme and radical. I actually don't particularly enjoy that. Like I have,
I like doing it, but mostly about topics which aren't political. Like
sure.
I was arguing earlier about whether Starship Troopers is good satire or not. And I was giving a hypothetical. They were saying that the Starship Trooper world isn't good satire and fascism because it's like it seems like a nicer place than the one we currently live in, and certainly better than like 90 like for a dystopia. It's lovely. And so I
Sure.
saw the hypothetical being like, well, if you were talking about if you're doing a film critical of the 2003 Iraq War, focusing on the fact that the American society in 2003 was a nicer place to live, I'm sure you're aware, than nearly every other society in history, just misses the point. But I only got halfway through it because I was also playing a video game in that example. So someone was like, well, the movie came out in 1998. It's not a film critiquing the Iraq War. And I was like, well, first off, it was a hypothetical, but second off, linear time isn't real.
Okay. Yeah. There we go. Now you're enjoying sounding extreme for it. So yeah, that's yeah, I mean that also just seems kind of like we were talking about this in the Midsommar episode, but I don't know whether film illiteracy has actually gotten worse in the last several years, or it only seems like it because I see people have these conversations online more. But it's like, yeah, the fact that you're sucked into it, that it seems fun, is the point. That's on purpose. Like it's not like Paul Verhoeven just didn't realize that that people were going to like enjoy or identify with this. He wants to make you feel uncomfortable,
right? He
right?
wants to take you on the journey of the mobile inventory moron.
Yeah, exactly, right. And also see how dumb he is, and also like have all these sort of constant reminders of how horrible and dystopian this is mixed into it. And then at the end, just in case you missed it, have have what's his name? Sorry, the actor Barney from How I Met Your Mother.
Him.
Yeah. Anyway,
touchy man.
Yes.
It's afraid.
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
Harris.
But yes, Neil Patrick Harris. Have him just in case you missed it. Have him come out wearing a fucking SS officer's uniform. Just like, no, this is what you've been enjoying.
To tell the conscripts that we're winning, actually. We're winning so hard. We've never won harder than we're winning right now.
It is almost a shame. I mean, obviously not for like the world, but like just for the sake of comedy, it is almost a shame that Donald Trump wasn't the president during the Iraq War. Because like his version of the mission accomplished speech would have been amazing.
I mean, but the thing is, kind of like he was so funny between 2016 to 2020 because his brain was like half rotted, but just at the level where it's still very funny. I feel like if he was president back then, his brain.
Oh no, that's right.
So it would have to be 2016 Trump. Well, I mean, time isn't real, Ben, as we established earlier, so it's fine. I accept you.
Yes,
I accept you.
Yes, it would have been very funny if 2016 and onward Trump had been president during the Iraq War, and so he would be giving us the speeches as like Fallujah was burning about how we're winning harder than we've ever won before, and people can't even believe all this winning.
You remember the bit where he was like at a trucker rally, and he was looking at one of the trucks and was like, I wish I could just get in one of those trucks and just drive away. Just leave, all you people. Just drive away. I've had a good life. I've had a long life. But I'm just imagining him doing that like in Iraq, and he's talking to like an M1 Bradley.
Yeah, I mean, just the fact that the man's trademark has always been that, or not always, as you say, but since his brain got to be like this, his trademark is that he just, I mean, he could be talking to 10,000 people at a rally, and just if a thought pops into his head, he will express it for all 10,000 of them.
I've said this before, but it's amazing that a Salafist became president.
Yeah, no, he's definitely like he sort of knows that all those other people exist.
He's possibly the
him,
least Christian president ever. Like the chance, like there are atheists. Most atheists, I would say, are much closer
are way more
much closer to recognizing like a higher power than Donald Trump is.
Yeah, exactly. This is, I mean, and it's, I mean, honest, yeah. I mean, my
Donald Trump, the only true atheist, is the kind of thing I'd spend my time on if I didn't have to do a PhD.
Yeah, this is the this is the half joking thing I always say about this. Half joking, because I actually think it is kind of true, is that it like the way to think about the way the culture war has changed since like the new atheism wars of the early 2000s is that it's like, yes, evangelicals are still, by far the sort of biggest and most reliable Republican voting bloc, but also American evangelicals would have no problem whatsoever with Donald Trump giving a speech in front of an inverted cross and a pool of blood, as long as like he owned the libs at some point in his speech.
They're talking on a recent chapter about how American kind of conservative commentators have completely switched from the early 2000s, where in the early 2000s they said like homosexuality is bad, as it says in the Bible, while now they say transgender stuff is Bible because of like evolutionary psychology.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is
That's
because
true.
kind of like the people who were saying that stuff against them in the early 2000s have kind of like switched sides in the culture war. So they're like with Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris are like broadly on their side.
Yeah, especially Dawkins. Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Harris is in many ways a worse person than Dawkins, but yeah, I think
Sam Harris does think about things, but not very well, but he really does think about things.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually do think, I think I said this when we did this episode last year. I actually do think there's like one genuinely non-shitty, non-ironic thing I will say in praise of Sam Harris, which is that which is that I actually do think Sam Harris is like one of the least audience captured people in media. That like he just thinks what he thinks, and he'll sort of hang out with whoever agrees with him about something at any given time. But then when he like disagrees with them, he'll just wander away and he'll continue to think what he thinks.
He like publicly dumps people. And yeah, a lot of stuff on his Reddit is like, Harris condemns guy that we like. What the fuck?
yeah, exactly. Like it's just not. So it's like, yeah. So I think he is actually like very. I think he does have a certain kind of integrity in his views. I just think those views are awful. But yeah, I know we got way off into a sidetrack here.
But did you have another major point that was left unsaid?
Well, I think all I was trying to say like 15 minutes ago before you mentioned Starship Troopers is that is that I think that the times where it's I think that there are basically a couple of reasons why it is actually important to talk about extreme demands. Sometimes that like extreme demands that are like well outside of the sort of realm of anything that feels like it could be politically possible anytime soon. And one of them is that I think induction from previous history should lead us to think that the current parameters of political possibility aren't what they always will be.
So sometimes decades happen in weeks.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, all the Lenin quotes that I should have included that I didn't. Man had a way with words. I mean, I know, I mean, I haven't read them in the original Russian, but I assume it's just as good there. Yeah, I think that, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, the abolition of slavery would have, for basically 99.9% of the time between like the agricultural revolution and last Tuesday, right? The abolition of slavery would have seemed completely ludicrous.
Well, and sometimes it might not have really even worked, Like the slave mode of production isn't called that because it's like a funny name.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, I think that
you could have abolished slavery, but then people would just become functionally serfs or whatever. Like it wouldn't, like they would have ended up being functional slaves regardless of what you did.
Which is kind of what happened in the transitional period in Haiti anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, kind of happened in the American South too after construction failed. Reconstruction.
Yeah. Reconstruction, yeah. Sharecroppers, yeah, it's a version of it, right? A sort of milder version, but definitely a version of it. Yeah, like I think, look, I mean, I think historical progress is enabled by material progress. That's not an insight that's original to me. That's historical materialism, but I think it is true. And so it's like, yeah, for the vast majority of that time, right, the development of the forces of production wouldn't have enabled it anyway, but like even after it did, right, it would have just like, yeah, come on, we've always had slavery, what are you talking about, right? Like or like the advances we were talking about earlier about the status of women, that is like, again, would have seemed deeply, deeply ludicrous, right? So it's like, I think it's a little arrogant to sort of foreclose some of those possibilities in advance. That there are, it's premature, right, to think that we can't have some of these things. And then the other thing is that I think that even in situations where it might actually make sense to essentially, politically bargain away things that we really want, which, is like, look, if you're going to do politics in the real world, you will surely very frequently have to do that in all sorts of ways, right? That they have life and history are full of depressing trade-offs. But I think that it's important to at least, if you're going to have that discussion, right? Like, like one of my favorite political movies is The Wind That Shakes the Barley, about the Irish Civil War. And
two bad sides.
If you think about, if you, I have, if you think about like the sort of scenes in that movie where they're arguing about, the treaty with Britain and all that, like, look, as much as I'm obviously, my sympathy as a viewer is definitely with the people who want to hold out for a 32 county socialist republic, that's it's not like the people saying this is our shot right now, right? If we don't want to delay independence until God knows when, it's not like they don't have any sort of point, right? Like,
I mean, but also the 32 county people were headbanger Catholic reactionaries.
Some of them, yeah, it's complicated, but
I mean, all the good ones got shot in 1916. It was left to the idiots who then eventually got into power and made Ireland into a, they kept Ireland as an agricultural British colony until 1974, when it gained independence from Britain by joining the European Union.
Yeah, but like the point is,
I probably shouldn't talk about Ireland.
But even if you think, right, even if you think that like this sort of, there was a like even if you think, as the movie clearly thinks, right, that there was like some sort of substantial faction of people with that 1916 kind of vision who were still in the mix, right? Even if you think that, right, like it's like, I think it is actually a little bit of a hard question in that context, right? Like how that would have actually played out, right? Whether it was worth doing that. And I think that it's possible to imagine, like right now, the idea of either a two-state or a democratic one-state solution coming to be in Israel Palestine is very hard to imagine. I mean, this is like, I think the I think that what's happening in Gaza, like is really like might not fulfill the man on the street definition of genocide, where you have to be intent to kill every single person, but certainly fulfills the definition of genocide in international law, where if
they're getting
trying
there.
to
In
kill
6 months, they've done 5% of the population killed, wounded, or missing. So they'll probably get up to a decimation by the end, a proper classic Roman decimation, as Israel continues in its 4th century BC politics.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's this, and then, as that lunatic Republican congresswoman from upstate New York had introduced the thing to require U.S. government documents to refer to the West Bank as Judea and Samaria, just to really cement those 4th century BC politics. But certainly under the international law definition of genocide, if you're trying to kill a whole ton of members of a group with the goal of making normal life for that group impossible and inducing as many of them as possible to accept voluntary transfer somewhere else, that's definitely genocide in the international law sense. And that's going on right now. There, the settler, pogroms against Palestinians in the West Bank are continuing. They're building more settlements. Joe Biden has announced that if this continues for another 100 years, there will be a stern talking to, right? So it's like obviously weapons will continue to flow. So
do you know the Chinese last warning? That concept.
Chinese last
warning was a Russian joke, or a Soviet joke rather, because the Chinese would have issued about 1,000 final warnings to the US over interference in over Taiwan, of which since the Soviet joke is being formed, they probably issued 1,000 more.
Right. Yes.
And so the Russians called a Chinese final warning is a final warning which has nothing final about it, but they should rename it Biden's final warning.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like under those circumstances, Netanyahu just announced they're building some new settlements. Like,
the most
under those circumstances,
people are the ones that are blocking the aid going to Gaza. In some sense, I think those are people who are morally corrupt and the ones that are actually shooting people.
Yeah, in a sense, that's certainly that they could stop without being put on trial for desertion. I think if you really want the war in Gaza in 2 images, it would be the Flower Massacre. So Palestinians who are starving being shot while they're trying to get to an aid truck, and the Israeli protesters blocking aid trucks, and while the IDF's like, what are you going to do?
You can't say that the Israel public and military aren't kind of united,
No, definitely not. No, this is basically, I actually think who said this? I think this might be Crystal Ball I'm cribbing this from, but she basically said, if you remember, so if you think about all the comparisons they're thrown around after 10/7 to 9/11, a lot of that was like very ridiculous in some obvious ways, right? Would say, proportionally speaking, this is however many 9/11s it was supposed to be.
Right.
Nobody ever seems to do 9/11 mass in Gaza, right? I think Crystal said at some point, it's like, yeah, look, as ridiculous as that is for like the point they're trying to make, there is actually a sense in which this is a useful analogy, because if you think about the kind of national insanity that the United States entered into after 9/11, where people like George W. Bush had like a 95% approval rating or something for, a minute there. There was like just this unanimous, like everybody except Barbara Lee voted for the war in Afghanistan, right? All 535 members, the House, 534 out of the 535 or something. There might have been a couple of people who missed the vote. Voted for the war in Afghanistan, the Patriot Act that shredded constitutional privacy protection.
And in the case of Israel, it's like if Iraq was Long Island.
Yeah, it's like if Iraq was Long Island and there was like a much bigger version of 9/11, right? Then I actually do think it's impossible. I actually do think it's depressingly easy to imagine.
It's a very similar kind of insanity.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that yeah, they're having our like post 9/11 lunacy, but like ramped up to a much greater degree for obvious reasons. And yeah, it's so it's like under these circumstances, even getting like a 2-state settlement, never mind like what I advocate, feels almost impossible to imagine right now, right? Certainly like a real 2-state settlement where Israel withdrew all the way to its 1967 borders, and there was going to be like a real Palestinian state with like a Palestinian army and a navy and all that stuff. It's just like right now that feels like a maximalist demand almost, even though it's like the official position of almost every government in the world and all of that.
Actually, it was interesting. David Cameron, Lord David Cameron now, actually made the point, which is very obviously true, but Western governments won't say for obvious reasons, where he said that Israel is the occupying power in Gaza, and so they are the ones that are responsible for there being food and water in Gaza. And if that doesn't happen, that's Israel's fault.
Yeah, it's a low bar, but he cleared it. Yeah, I mean, this is obviously like, it's kind of in so many ways, Gaza is like Schrodinger's territory. It's certainly something that, Israel has never has never ceded any sort of, territorial claim to, right? Like it's never, it has obviously never allowed to, secede or act like a separate state, and
but also like much more than like, for instance,
but like whenever it's convenient, like it talks about it as if it's a separate state. It's like, oh well, that's Hamas's responsibility to provide. It's like, well, hold on, right? That's like, so you can't say that and then continue to make this territorial claim on it, right? Like it's got to be.
And it's much worse than kind of like the Russian claim that Ukraine isn't real in whatever way, because kind of the Russians want the land and the people, right? They want the people to, they believe that the people can become Russians or already are Russians or whatever.
Right.
And, are willing in that way to do cultural genocide. But they want the land and the people. But the Israelis just want the land. They really, and there's no way that they want, there's nothing that, like, if the Gazans started, like, converting to Judaism, Israel would just say, no, you're not, actually.
No, clearly, right? Like, this is, yeah, this is, I've thought about that before. It's like, it's like, all right, here's a quick way to enfranchise everybody. It's the just do mass conversion to Judaism. That's yeah, no, I don't. I think that's clearly right. I mean, it's like clearly if that somehow happened, right? If they have they brought in some somebody from like the Jewish Voices for Peace Rabbinical Council and smuggled them into Gaza, and did some quick conversions, giant mikveh for so like you could do like 100 people at once, like the opening scene of The Righteous Gemstones, right? then clearly they would find a way not to accept it because clearly the whole point, right, is that it's a exclusivist ethno-nationalist project, right? So it's very importantly unlike something like Russia, Ukraine, where it's very bad, right? But like that sort of assimilationist colonialism where you're trying to
And it leads, it's not just kind of a rhetorical thing, it leads very concretely to much worse outcomes. Like, for instance, when they invaded eastern Ukraine, Russia, well, they invaded all of Ukraine at one point. It's easy to forget, but they were perfectly willing to let all the Ukrainians in Ukraine go into Russia. That served them, and there's now a million Ukrainians. Well, a million more Ukrainians. No, actually, there was a million to start with. I think there's 2 million more now in Russia, and that's really bad for Ukraine and bad in general. But the thing that is much worse is what Israel does, and I can't think of any other state which has done that, where it's accepted 0 people out of Gaza. Like, I was thinking that if Israel did, if they actually started concentration camps in the Negev, like closed concentration camps, not in the Nazi sense, but in the traditional sense of concentration camp, that would be better than their actual policy.
Yeah, no, it's very. I mean, look, I know this is treading in dangerous territory, and I generally dislike World War II analogies, if only because I really think because they're just so ludicrously overused by everybody all the time.
But they are really getting there. They're really trying. I was really reluctant to start too, but they're really trying.
Yeah, they really are getting there. I mean, this is like really kind of amazing because like they've even gotten to the point where they've lost the usual sort of Zionist line that hey, why are you talking about this? Because like look at what's happening over there and over there and over there, right? Talk about that. It's like no. Literally in mathematical terms, this is the worst thing happening in the world right now. And yeah, this is the but yeah, I mean, like what it made me think of is for some awful reason. I mean, I guess I'm maybe lucky. I've been because in my entire history as a YouTube user, this has never happened before. But I actually did get the algorithm feeding me a few videos by somebody who seems to be like an actual Nazi apologist, who is the Zoomer historian is the name of the
yeah, that makes sense.
Channel. And so and then like because it was feeding me some of those, it fed me some video that was debunking this guy, and I actually did like I didn't want to click on any of the Zoomer story videos because I don't want the algorithm to feed me more of this, but but I clicked on this just out of curiosity. It's like so like at least hear for the debunking video what it is. And it's like, yeah, I mean, thinking about like the difference between like because what I thought of when you were saying the thing about Russia and Ukraine versus Israel and Gaza is like, look, this is it's not a one-to-one by any means, right? But like it reminds me of like the distinction between the way that the Nazis occupied France and the way that the Nazis occupied Eastern Europe, right? Because it's like the Nazi occupation of France was a very bad time. Very not good. But many people killed, as former president would say. But like basically the Nazis thought that French people were human beings.
I mean, they killed them for fighting back mostly, which the French absolutely 100% had a right to do. But that was kind of the schema.
Of course, right. Yeah, they basically killed French people for fighting back, not because like they were French and that's you need to kill and sterilize as many French people as possible to to get rid of the racial inferiority, which is very much the sort of policy that they were starting to implement even towards Eastern European Gentiles. And yeah, I mean the fact that like and again, I'm not claiming it's a one-to-one, but like also I would just say like if your country gets to the point where people who are being a little bit careful about this start to have conversations about whether Nazi analogies are totally out of the question, then that's pretty bad, right? Like that's that's you've gone to a pretty bad place where it's like, oh shit, this is a little bit like that, isn't it?
The I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before. I mean, it all blurs together in this war. But there was this video released of an Israeli soldier like killing an old man, and then his mates coming and being like, "Oh yeah," he's like, "Oh, I shot him dead. Had his hands up or whatever, and I killed him." And they're like, "Oh, nice one, man." Um, but the thing I thought about that video, which I didn't see other people saying, is why? How are we watching this video? Because that was headcam footage,
Right.
and I assume that the only reason this is on Al Jazeera is because those Israeli guys or someone even higher up thought it was good to publish this, which really indicates like more than ever in this war, like the Russians, like when they did the massacres, or when like the Ukrainians like did stuff to
Yeah.
Russian prisoners, they had to like find it out with like satellites and like archaeology and stuff.
Yeah, because
These
that's the normal situation when you do war crimes, that like other people have to do some digging to figure out that
you have to like
happened.
look at like drone videos and be like, that one pixel is a prisoner getting executed. But the Israelis are just publishing like full HD footage of them doing it and then being like, I did that. And the other one being like, that's good, which indicates like a completely degenerate culture of which there's not really clear how there's any way back from.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is the kind of thing that like it's really gone to a very dark place when you have this many war crimes that are being documented, for the public by
The people who did
by the people who are carrying them out, right? Like, yeah, exactly. And like, even if like some of them are like, I don't know, I assume some of the videos we're seeing are like things that weren't necessarily intended for like wide consumption, but it's like, look, man, if you're doing the even if it was only intended for your group chat back home, this is still a really bad sign.
You heard a few months ago when it came out that like the biggest Israeli gore channel on Telegram, which in of itself is an insane sentence, was directly run by the IDF intelligence division.
Yep. I do. I talked about that in the I think the not well, it wasn't this week's Jackman article, but it was the one before that, the one about the New York Times. I think I touched on that, but yeah, this is
like I can't see like the slightest way I can see a way back for Israel is if they like actually lose a war. But first off, that's not going to happen. Like they really struggled in Gaza, but there's a difference between that and actually losing. And it's only like a 50-50 thing. If you lose a war, you can kind of sometimes you simmer out, but sometimes you just go harder. And especially with the position that Israel's in, the latter seems more likely.
Yeah, that is the problem, because it's like, one, that does seem like the more likely outcome is the going harder, and two, I mean, we'd have to find out, right? But like, two, as you said, it's very hard right now to imagine how that would happen. I mean, like maybe if Netanyahu got into like a much bigger regional war, right, then like maybe they would lose that eventually. Like,
but he has 300 nuclear weapons, so
yeah, I mean, I think that definitely puts a limit on how much you can lose, right?
It's the same reason that people demanding a Russian civil war are asking for the worst thing in the world.
Oh my God, yeah. People who want a Russian civil war, that is like, it is very, very difficult to overstate how insane that is, right? That's like, and this is why I've always, like, I don't know, it's like, keep asking people for the last 2 years, like, okay, like, what's the end game to your mind, right? Like, people who are like, oh no, if there's ever like a negotiated peace settlement between Russia and Ukraine, that's bad because that's like capitulation, and you should, Chamberlain at Munich stuff. It's like, well, hold on. If you really meant that analogy, like, we know what. So you think about the end of World War II, right? Because like that's what you're saying would be the appropriate thing to be happening instead. It's It's like, so what? Like the Ukrainian army is like, driving through Moscow, right? Like this is like the Red Army in Berlin. It's like, yeah, if that's not it, right? Like if you think any negotiations ever would be bad, then either you think that there's
But like, if the
scenario.
Nazis had 15,000 nuclear weapons, sorry to say it, but
That would
it would
actually
change
change
things a
the
lot. Yeah, you can't actually at that point.
that would considerably change the normative
It's at that point where you
calculation
have to
because,
support like the guys that are trying to coup Hitler, but just like they're like,
yeah.
I'm fine with the Holocaust, but it's fucked up what we're doing to these Estonians or whatever, like those guys.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely like, yes, I think that insofar as the obliteration of the human race would be a bad thing,
Maximalist demands. We're back.
Yes. That's a maximalist demand I would not endorse. Yes, that would definitely change the normative calculation about World War II. So it's like, yeah, I don't. So it's like, look, do you want? So it's like, if you don't think that's going to happen, which by the way means that even if you did magically retake all of the Donbass and Crimea, you'd still have to have some sort of negotiation at the end, right? Like this is like, or are you just like anticipating everybody just sort of like staring at each other?
Right, no, because like
God, I was going to
Russia
say,
just does like missile strikes, which are based from 1992 Russia into central Ukraine, and capturing Donbass
right.
and Crimea wouldn't change that. It make them
Right,
a bit less
exactly,
accurate,
right?
which is probably bad actually, because then they go and like blow up children or whatever.
Yeah. So it's like, yeah, you have so it's like, yeah, you'd still eventually have to do a peace negotiation. I mean, otherwise it's like, I mean, do you want Russia to become like a failed state? And yeah, I'm not unaware that there are certain respects in which it already is, but like, that's like a really failed state, right? Like,
I mean, it basically it
I
happened
think
with Prigozhin, right? But it kind of just fizzled out, as
yeah,
everything seems to do in Russia.
yeah. Like, because if one of the, I mean, major stock, like what the top two stockpiles of nuclear weapons in the world, right? If that country ended up becoming like a really failed state, like that's, I very much dislike our chances if that happened. And like, I have a,
And
if
in
we're
that
going to do an
case,
ordering scheme.
do you know who Russian warlords would use nukes on? If not first, because maybe they'd use them on each other, who would they use them on second? It's Ukraine. Ukraine is getting,
yeah, of
by
course, right?
vengeful Russian warlords, Ukraine is getting absolutely fucking glassed for getting them like their dacha blown up by the idiot down in Rostov, you know?
Yeah, of course, right? Like this is, I mean, look, all right. So two final thoughts. One, I think the reason that for the cases where it's really good and it's really importantly good, right? If something happened and we know exactly how to do it, it's just that there are considerable political obstacles. I think one reason to hold out hope for it anyway, to keep talking about it, is because, again, historical induction, things change. And also, yeah, exactly, Yanis. And two, I think even if we are in a situation where, like, yeah, like let's say things changed in some dramatic way, there was some unpredictable political earthquake that made a real two-state solution possible, but wasn't good enough to make like a democratic one-state solution possible, it might very well be worth taking that, right? Like if that was like meaningfully on the table. But I think even to think properly about those trade-offs, you need to have some sense of what you'd actually want as a way of evaluating, like what you'd be getting, right? Like as a, I think it's good to be clear-eyed about what you'd be trading away and why that would be worse. And then final thought, just to tie all the subjects together. All right. So we said earlier, international socialism, best idea. Liberal modernity, second best idea. Obliterated the human race. I'm going to say worst idea.
Bad. Many are saying bad.
It's what I've been hearing.
I would just want to say that my monologue last week went well. Um,
Good.
I would need a chat slave, I think, in future because I tried to read chat and read my notes and it was impossible. And then I considered pausing to read chat, but then I was like, I'll just lead to massive silences on the VOD. So I mostly just persevered and then kind of talked to chat a bit at the end. And I'd also say that everyone was very nice to me. Lots of people watched, and everyone was nice to me in the comments of the show and on the comments of the VOD. So that presumably means it wasn't bad, but I'm also thankful for everyone for being nice. Because
Excellent.
that was
Yeah.
my first ever
No, that
monologue,
is.
and I did it live, which was very brave.
Yeah. Fuck it. We'll do it live.
The conclusion
Right.
was that you shouldn't self-immolate, by the way.
Yeah, I tend to agree with
And
that.
specifically in the
I'm
case of Aaron Bushnell, kind of his self-immolation was basically like kind of the maximally virtuous immolation you could do. But the
sure.
immolation, those virtues of that immolation emerged primarily out of his personal virtues. And if you're that personally virtuous, then actually you should be doing other things other than self-immolating. So even though his self-immolation was the most justifiable one, I concluded that it was also unjustifiable in his case.
Yeah, I mean that all sounds right to me. Like I think that you can say that it's very I think the fact that if you're somebody who would do that, like that, I think that says all kinds of really good things about him. I think that it's I was trying to do a rank ordering, right? Here's top, here's down below, here's the bottom. Wasn't trying. International social salute. So yeah, I think I think that there's obviously that level of dedication is really admirable, and obviously the thing that he's trying to highlight is I mean I think the thing going on in the world right now most worth highlighting.
And,
I'm
and we
not
can't
sure.
deny that he did highlight it. Like it did work, actually.
To a certain extent, yeah. I mean, this definitely, yeah. I mean, I think it definitely helps, shine the spotlight a little bit brighter for a second. But also, yeah, I do think like, look, I would rather it not be the case that people who are opposed to the worst thing in the world happening right now burn to death.
Which I know in the video is like the worst way to die too. It's very, very bad. Like
Yeah,
doing the worst thing to yourself.
yeah, I did. I thought about not. I did watch the video, and that was a rough watch. And it's like, look, I don't want people who are opposed to the worst thing happening in the world right now to burn to death. I would obviously be most against them being burned to death by their political enemies, but I also don't think we should do it to ourselves. I think it just shouldn't happen if at all possible. And I think people should stay alive and keep keep speaking out against this. And I suppose that is I was going to end on the joking note of the of the global socialism being the best thing and obliterating the human race being the worst thing, but I guess I'll just end on the hopelessly earnest note and say what I just said.
Great. I wanted to do the salute, but to go up, I realized I can't press the button as I do it. So Ben will have to do it. Bye, everyone.
But